to the CodePrep Podcast, the podcast that shows you how you can get into tech. Today's guest is Daneez Owais. Daneez is originally from Pakistan. She moved to the United States in 1999 to study journalism. After graduating, she eventually ended up as a business analyst at a software company. While at that company, she started doing QA as well as technical writing. She is also a speaker at tech conferences. Today, she will be explaining to our audience what it's like to be a QA in tech and how you can do it too. So let's get started. Daneez, can you tell our audience about your journey into tech and how you became a QA person?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My journey actually started in 1990 when my dad forcefully put me into Unix classes because he really wanted me to go into tech. And sadly, I did not pay attention to anything that was happening in those classes except for learning how to send messages to other classmates through the command prompt. But anyways, after that, I ended up in being a teacher for the corporate program for Microsoft. That was also basically for the sake of having a job, and that I started teaching Microsoft Office to all the corporate companies. I ended up in coming to America for basically pursuing journalism because I have thought so highly of Dan Rather and all these, famous celebrities. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I joined school for journalism and basically figured out that there's no money in journalism unless you're a big shot, So I ended up in getting a job as a BA, as a business analyst for a software company. It's a software company for food brokers. They're the ones between the grocery stores and the manufacturing companies. We provided a software for the food brokers. So I started as a BA, and I remember they did this huge release, and it was a failure. We were sitting in the office till 11 o'clock at night, trying to roll things back because every single report failed. And so me and my big mouth walked into this senior programmer's room, and I said, hey, for the next time, why don't you just put everything in a dev environment and let me go through it before we do a release? And he said, oh, you're game for that? I said, yes. And he said, sure. So that's how my QA skills started. I had a lot of learning to do. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Simple things like, if this field is being advertised as 30 character only, are we capping it at 30 or are we allowing them to type more characters? Simple things like that had to be checked, and I had to learn how to do all those things. As this was going on, I saw that the release notes that were sent to the clients were bulleted lists. We did this, we did this, we did this. And our clients are not that tech savvy. That market was not that tech savvy. So I suggested that I said, okay, we are changing screens. We are rebranding. So let's do a before and after screenshot and send that and explain to them exactly what we changed in that screen. So once again, you suggest something and you're hitting your own foot. So I ended up in doing those whole release notes again. So that's how my journey initially started in QA.
Okay, so I'm going to need to take a step back here.
Okay.
I feel like we just had a moment. You know how when you're watching a movie and someone's like, they're a school teacher or they're a hairstylist or they're a dentist, and like one day they just wake up and say, I'd like to be an astronaut now. And in the movie they get like, a 5-minute montage, and in that 5 minutes it's like shots of them training. And I feel like we just skipped over your montage, because what I just heard was you were a journalism major who did Microsoft Office training, and then one day said, hey, this release was FUBAR'd. I would very much like to be your QA. Like, what are you thinking? okay, so I think we missed your montage. How did you know that it needed QA? And what had you done so that you weren't just looking at code that made no sense? Like, how did you get to a place where you felt comfortable saying, hey, you need someone to go through this in a dev environment before you make this live?
Well, it was conversations, kitchen conversations with the developers, discussions about the release that was a failure and that was being rolled back till 11 o'clock at night. And I was sitting in the office as well, fielding calls from the customers because we had West Coast customers, we had customers in Hawaii. And so it was like, why did you guys release this like this? I don't understand. They said, oh, well, we checked it to the best of our abilities, but we can't check every single report. And I was like, okay, then why didn't you ask other people in the office to check it? Why didn't you call in everybody from customer support and just say, let's check it? And at that point, basically, I think my problem is that I'm also a perfectionist when it comes to a lot of things. So it bothered me that something like this went out like this. And to me, it became more of an ego issue. Like, I can't let this kind of shit go out. Excuse my language. But, that was, that is where it actually started, that, okay, I will take out time from my BA duties and I will go ahead and test this out, because I was talking directly to the customers anyways. So I knew what they were looking for. So that also helps you, when you understand what the user's needs are, it helps you do, present it better within the company. So that is basically how it all started. Literally, it was a kitchen conversation.
I love that.
I love that it's a kitchen conversation that it started, but I think also I want to emphasize something that you said that's just invaluable for anybody that's listening to this podcast is y'all did a rollout. It was, it mucked up pretty bad. You had to recall it because it was just so bad. And you took the initiative on your own without being asked, saying, I can improve this process if you let me do this. And you were able to do that by stepping up into the void where something that needs to be done. And if anybody that's listening that is in tech or wants to improve their career, listen to what she just said she did, because it launched her career, and it's something that you can do, anybody can do at any company. So I just wanted to make sure people, don't gloss over that concept of what you did, because the best workers are the workers who did what you just did. Now, my question is, QA. A lot of people want to know what's involved in doing QA on a day-to-day basis. I am a front-end developer. Valerie is a DevOps person. So normally in a work environment, I write code, I finish, she deploys it to production, and so forth. QA falls in between that, where they verify that my code works, they verify that my code meets the requirements, and so forth. So can you tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis in QA, and maybe what tools that you use so that people that are looking to get into this career will know what to expect?
Sure. QA actually, in the course of the last 15 years, the definition of QA has changed in the tech world. It involves getting involved with different kinds of teams, whether it's research, design, not just developers, not just DevOps. So what we do on a regular basis is, as new features are being created, we test them to make sure that they are working correctly. Okay. The misconception about QA is that, we find bugs, we find defects. No, that's not just our job. We make sure that everything is working the way a designer thought about it in their mind, a researcher during a user interview, what expectations they gave to the user, that what we will be giving to them. So that is where QA comes in. We ensure that all those things are being met. So basically, it is making sure that everything that is new that is being introduced into the software is working correctly. Then another important aspect of QA is that before a release is done, QA has to do what is called regression testing, in which there is different forms of regression. There is critical path, there is full regression. Generally, if you're doing CI, you end up doing a critical path, the regression. So, which is you touch the most basic functionality of the software to make sure that it is working. In that, we also involve stats, user stats. For example, from Optimizely or from Google Analytics, we ask our research team to give us stats on what is the part of the software that is being most commonly used, what are the screens that are being clicked on most commonly, and our critical path ensures that all those are working before we do a release.
Okay, so you're focusing more on testing out the product, making sure that not only is it working, like there's no defects, but the features are delivered as promised, exactly what the customer's been told they're going to get. That's what they're going to get. So you're not necessarily fixing the problems that you find so much as writing reports, very detailed. Like, how do you get that information to your dev team, and what is the scope of your portion of this process?
So we if we find something wrong with the new features that are being introduced, or if you're doing rebranding and it doesn't meet the criteria that the design team has given us, we end up writing tickets. Generally, most of the companies, I think, are using Jira as a tool, and we tag the developers that have worked on those features, in that explaining to them. It is very essential to literally write step by step. I clicked on this, I clicked on this. Also, for example, if you're doing mobile, so it is very important to specify this is iOS, or this is Android, this is tablet, this is phone. So they need all that detail from us, because they don't have time to come and stand at my desk and ask me to reproduce it in front of them. There's too much going on. So we use Jira to write the report, the whole report, step by step. And then we also give them what is called an acceptance criteria, telling them that when you send this back to me, this is when I'm going to consider it done. These are the things that should meet the criteria. And then I will say, okay, this ticket is done. A very common misconception about QA is that we are gatekeepers, which we are not. We are just there to point out what we have found. And I have a motto that I follow in the office, and my team knows it very well. I will say my piece, and then I will forever hold my peace. And so that is what I do. I point out what I have found. I feel this is wrong, but okay, if you guys say this is not a deal breaker, let it go, fine, I will step back. So that's how QA is supposed to actually operate in the market. We are not the gatekeepers.
Okay.
That's great to know, because so many companies fail to do QA, and I think the quality of the product that they produce is a direct reflection of that, and it's a mistake that some people do. You mentioned about using Jira as a tool that you use in QA. What other tools do you use in a QA role? And if somebody's interested in getting into it, what should they be learning in order to prepare themselves to transition into tech, into a role as a QA person?
Sure. So I mentor a lot of people to come into QA. I have a guide. The first thing I tell them is to read a book. It's called Lessons Learned in Software Testing. It's a funny take on QA, but it explains a lot of concepts in a very lighthearted manner. Basically, there are so many different types of QA. There's functional testing, there's non-functional testing, there's regression, there's smoke testing. So start with learning what each of these things are. I was very impressed by an interview that I did. That girl, was not aware of what QA was at all. And we were looking for people that had a clean slate so we could train them. She walked in, and after I was done interviewing, and I said, "Do you have anything for me? Do you have any questions?" She said yes. She took out her folder and she put the file in front of me and she flipped it open and she said, "Why does your website have all these JavaScript errors?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, you guys, this submit button is not working on your website." And I was like, wow, wow. That I was impressed. The initiative she took. She did not know anything about QA, but she knew the fact that the submit button that doesn't work, this is wrong. So have that analytical, critical mind, especially when you're preparing for an interview, research the company's website for these kind of things. Another important thing to learn is the Dev Chrome tools, because that's where you can do a lot of network testing and performance testing. A lot of things come in that. For me, so I was doing the same thing. It's like a factory worker, in the assembly line. For 11 years here in America, I was doing the same thing. Okay, fine, test this, let it go. 11 years. I refused to come out of my comfort zone, to come into the market, to figure out what is out there. And until somebody gave me a push. And the biggest thing that helped me was all the meetups and all the local tech events I went to. Out of the blue, I started going to all these conferences. I remember Rails conference was in town in Atlanta. This is when I was still scared of coming out of my comfort zone. And I've forgotten her last name, Sandy, who's an author for an object-oriented programming book. I think she lives in North Carolina. She was here for RailsCon, and Women Who Code had asked her to come to the ThoughtWorks office to present and to talk to Women Who Code members. I remember literally I was dragged to that gathering, and I sat there and everything she said went shoo. And I came out of there and I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what she was talking about. But I promised myself that even if I go to gatherings where I don't understand a single thing, I'm still going to go. Because then I came home and I researched all those terms she had mentioned. Instance of a class, method. I came home and I researched everything. Next time when I went to a gathering, I knew a little bit more. Not everything, but I knew a little bit more. And that's how all this became such a heavy thing that, I'm heavily involved now in the local events, and I love mentoring people. And I have met so many nice people because of these things. So it is very essential to do networking, very important. And I've heard from a lot of people, I'm an introvert. I don't like going to gatherings. I don't like talking to people. And I always tell them, fine, be an introvert. Go sit in the corner of the room of the gathering. Don't talk to anybody, but listen. What are the conversations? That's what's going to tell you what is happening in your local tech community. What are the new things that are coming out? So you can actually speak up in your office, or when somebody says, oh, React. Oh yeah, I know this about React. You can actually say something in a meeting. So these are the things that really help you. What was it that you were pointing out?
I feel like you just told us your montage. You just told us steps involved, and now I can see a video of you, and you're at the meetup, and at first you're kind of timid, and then at the next one you're like, hey, I recognize you, and at the next one you're speaking. Which brings me to, you're doing a QA workshop in Atlanta on March 23rd, I believe, an all day.
Yes. And it is at the SalesLoft office.
Very excited.
It's at the SalesLoft office, and we are bringing in QA experts, local QA experts, to do like 45-minute sessions. So the idea behind that workshop is specifically, I have noticed these people that graduate from boot camps. they only know three things that they can go into: front end, back end, full stack. And those are the positions that they apply for.
Yep.
What is missed, because there is no official training for these kind of things. You learn this on the go as you get into a job. There is another very important role in coding that is called test engineering, automation. You automate tests. So you are writing code for that too. Automation can be done in Ruby, it can be done in Selenium. These are all the things that are out there. So the objective for a QA bootcamp is to inform these people that, hey, coding doesn't just apply to these traditional roles. There is this out there as well. So our idea is to start with basic concepts in QA and then do a high-level Selenium mini workshop to show them, to get their interest. If they're interested, when they leave the workshop, maybe they might go and do a Selenium course to, educate themselves more. Yeah.
Well,
so that's the whole idea.
So we normally ask for sort of a game-changing recommendation, some sort of recommendation that makes your life in tech better, something. And we've had answers anywhere from, one woman said the Instant Pot saved her so much time. It helped her, devote more time to study. And we've had other people, it's a way of thinking. Would you say that networking and going to meetups was your recommendation? I mean,
that is definitely my recommendation, and also going to conferences. I'll give you an example. I went to my first Strange Loop in St. Louis 2 years ago, and I tell you, so many topics went over my head, but I have been religiously going. And the more I go each year, I feel I have a little bit more info. So it helps you. I have met so many people through these conferences. A little bit of background. I was laid off in 2017. It was this network that helped me get my new job. So, I actually, when the layoff happened, I said to myself, wait, I know people. I have my people that I can call, and so that is precisely what I did. I gave an SOS to my people that are in the market. So these things help you a lot. Networking is very essential.
That is so true. It's so critical that people understand that networking is so important. If you can help somebody else out in through networking, or somebody can help you out when you need help, as long as you've built up that network. So that's great advice. So I can't wait to see what you're going to give me for our final recommendation that we ask for our guests. And that recommendation is, if somebody wants to get into QA, the last thing that they have to go through, that last hurdle, is the job interview process. The job interview process in tech is a little bit different from any job that you will ever have. So we're looking for a great recommendation for people on how to handle the job interview process for getting into tech. So what recommendation would you like to share?
So essentially in the tech community, when you go to a job interview, it's usually split into behavioral questions and technical questions. For behavioral questions, they're trying to figure out if you would be a good fit for their company. So they will ask you questions like, how would you react in a scenario like this? So think about those things before you go, like, oh, my team member disagrees with something that I'm saying. How will I handle that situation? So those are behavioral questions that are very essential that a lot of big companies are asking now. For technical, my biggest advice is never wing an answer. Look at the interview straight in their eyes if you do not know the answer and say, I'm sorry, I do not know. Because when you try to wing an answer, when you try to just make it up, they know. And they will not trust you after that. So it is very important. One of the interviews I gave later on, after I was hired, I asked the interviewer, I said, what was it that you really liked about my interview? And he said, you told me, I asked you a question and you did not know the answer. And you said, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. And he said, that was it for me, that she's not trying to be something that she is not. She's being honest. So for the technical part, that is very important. If you are also already in an engineering environment and going to another company's engineering environment, it's good to know what your web stack is in the current company. What is it that, what are the different technology softwares that are being used? Web stack is very important to know.
Yeah.
Another thing that I have found that people forget once they get a job is they stopped updating their LinkedIn profile. So I always tell everybody, I don't care if you have an awesome job, make sure that your LinkedIn is, maintained. I maintain a Google Doc. It's called Niceties. So if I have proposed some new change or some new process in my team, I immediately go and write it down like, oh, on November 29th, I suggested this and this is how we implemented it. Okay. Because end of the year, when your review comes and you're asked to fill out your review paperwork, how are you going to remember what you did throughout the year?
Mm-hmm.
So it is good to have that Google Doc. I also use the same Google Doc to update my LinkedIn profile. Like introduce this into the team, suggested this, or implemented this. So that becomes your resume for any other job.
I love that. I love that you just told our listeners to please keep track of how awesome you are and toot your own horn, because no one else is going to applaud you unless you're applauding yourself. I love
Exactly.
that.
Exactly.
The caveat to that last sentence is right now we are both applauding you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being on today, for taking some time out and sharing your knowledge. I know that I learned a lot, and I'm so excited our listeners now have more knowledge. For those at home listening, please take a minute, if you would, and give us a review on iTunes. Let us know how we're doing. Leave us some comments. Let us know what else you'd like to hear. But for now, thank you for listening. We've had a blast, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, guys.